Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of two autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support.
Hi, and welcome to episode 47, where we're talking about autistic pathological demand avoidance.
And there's a reason why we are skipping to this episode, and I'd like you to let our listeners know why.
Well, for anyone who listens all the way to the end, first of all, thank you. I know not everybody listens to the end, so I appreciate for those people who do. And this episode is not what we were originally going to do, but we had a subscriber ask for this topic, and we always, really appreciate when people reach out. So thank you to Amy for suggesting this as a topic, and we inserted it in as soon as we could. So for anyone else, always feel free to comment or can send us a private message. Our email is on our website as well. And I think I can also add our email to the description, so that's easier to access. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yep, here we go. Let's begin with the definition, because I know where you like to start.
That's right. Pathological demand avoidance. We're just going to talk about it as PDA or PDAers for this episode. It's sometimes referred to as pervasive drive for autonomy because pathological is not really neurodiversity affirming language. And as for a definition, it is not a separate diagnosis. Like, you're not going to find it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's not in there. It's kind of a behavior profile, and it's often seen in, but not exclusive to, autistic individuals. And it's characterized by an intense resistance to demands and expectations.
Yeah. One of the areas in which it is often seen in is FAS, which is fetal alcohol syndrome. But that is an entirely different subject, but the same strategies that I would use there, I would apply across the board.
PDA is tied to high anxiety levels, which is really important to understand because this isn't just someone being unnecessarily difficult or stubborn or contrary. It's a neurobiological need for control and autonomy. So I think to really understand PDA, you need to understand what a demand is.
Anything can be a demand, right? So it could be a request as simple as, could you pass me the mug? Could be a demand. So we're going to have to learn how we can change our language and our approach on a day-to-day basis in order to make that relationship far more amicable between you and the person that displays this.
So the way my brain works, everything needs to have a category. Everything needs to be linear. It needs to be lined up. It needs to have a flow. So I broke down demands into 7 different types, and it's not individual boxes, but sort of a Venn diagram. But the reason that I broke it down into 7 different types is because to give people an idea of the sort of major headings, because demands are not always what you think they are. Most people think of demands as direct external demands, like a command. So those clear, explicit instructions or requests from other people, like put your shoes on, go get your backpack, don't do that. People think those are demands. Those are commands. So they are a type of demand, but that's not the only kind of demand that there is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I've got 3 types of, I've categorized mine in 3, but I'm happy to, ebb and flow with you and, jump in and
there's
strategies.
overlap. But what I really want to do is highlight what a demand can be that you might not actually think of as a demand. So that's sort of your direct external, but you also have indirect external demands. And those are sort of less obvious expectations that are implied and not specifically always stated, like sitting quietly in a library or a classroom or following a routine without prompting. No one is directly telling you what to do, but you know that those are expectations that you have to have. Like, those are expectations placed upon you.
Yeah, those indirect and implied demands are often the ones that cause the biggest triggers because they involve the social interaction or the unspoken social rules that often a person with autism finds difficult to understand.
Yeah, and I have social demands down as a separate thing, but I will get there. Internal
Okay.
demands, internal. So that comes from within the person themselves, and it can be goals that they set for themselves, or values, or self-imposed expectations, like feeling that you should complete a task even though no one else is making you do it, but the feeling that you should do it, or trying to meet your own personal standards, or perfectionism.
It could also be something like your bodily needs, such as hunger, right? So that could be an internal demand. And there's resistance to that too
Yeah,
when those are imposed on you.
of course,
Yeah.
I've broken that down into a different one. So I consider that to be a sensory demand, because people don't necessarily think of sensory things as also can be demands, right? Like having to endure a noisy classroom, that can be those unspoken indirect ones, but it's also a sensory thing at the same time. Venn diagram, not separate boxes. And then you're right, social demands. So those unspoken social demands of like needing to maintain a conversation, or making sure that you respond appropriately with your tone and your body language and your word usage, and participating in group activities. All of those can be demands, whether they're external or internal.
Absolutely. And then, of course, our biggest category is the direct demand, which often is sparks to a lot of things. So,
They're the
um,
most recognizable probably for neurotypical people, but I think that even emotional demands are demands, and that's that unspoken rule of you need to stay calm during a stressful thing, or suppress your frustration, work through it, or even comforting someone else is a social demand, but it's also an emotional demand.
mhm. Absolutely. Direct demand, in giving an example, is like, asking somebody to brush your teeth, right? It does hop into two different categories because there is a sensory aspect to that. And, but it is, a demand. So it's a direct demand. But we'll give you examples and then we'll do some
Yeah,
strategies
I
on
just
how
want
best
people
to do
to
this.
sort of have a well-rounded idea of demands are not just commands, and they can come from almost anywhere. And there's the last one I have is that a demand could even be positive or desirable, which sounds a little odd. It can be like a fun activity can be experienced as a demand, like opening presents. Yeah, that's very exciting, can be very pleasurable, but there could be unspoken rules around it, or expectations, or even self imposed expectations about opening presents, or playing a game, or going to the movies. It could be anything.
Yeah. So let's dive into this a little bit more and then we'll go through our list and we'll tag between the two between examples and strategies that we can use for each one of them.
Yeah, I think it's important that when you're looking at all of this, the issue is not what the demand is, but it's the perception of being expected or required to do something. And that's what triggers the avoidance. But you can't avoid demands in life.
Yeah. So building resiliency is going to be key to overcoming or bridging the gap between being able to be lowering your anxiety and to have emotional regulation through these episodes.
This is going to be an aside, but I think at some point you and I are going to have a discussion on resiliency, because I think the more I hear that word, the less I like it.
I know, but you
And
still love me.
no, I know that's got nothing. It's not personal. Information's not always personal. I think that resiliency, it's going to have to be its own topic, because I think there's so much about resiliency that is really about getting the autistic person simply to be able to tolerate more pain. That's what it comes down to. So there's a line there, and we're
There
gonna
is
have
a
to
fine
talk.
line.
We're gonna have to talk about it, but not right
Okay.
now. All right. So
Alrighty.
avoidance techniques. So escaping or evading demands. So the first one I have is distraction or changing the subject. And keep in mind that these can be unconsciously done and can be just automatic responses. Like it's not like someone says to themselves, "Oh, hey, I'm not going to do this." It's knee jerk a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So,
and that is one of the biggest. It's like, oh, I have to go to the, for I'm going to use an example of the education system. Okay, it's time for us to do coloring. And there, a diversion or a distraction would be like, yeah, but I really need to go to the bathroom right now. So
So what's a
they're
strategy for
not,
that?
so you can say, oh, I love that you told me that you need to go to the washroom. Before you go, would you mind just grabbing me the colors and putting it on your desk? Um, I would really be helping me because I'm gonna go get set up with some other stuff. Could you please do that? That would be such a huge help for me. I would really appreciate it.
And what if the distraction is talking nonstop?
Well, then I would say, I love that you're talking, and I would start inserting information. So I would use this as an opportunity to gain more insight, right? Because communication, when they're opening consciously or subconsciously, you're going to learn a lot about that person. So instead of saying, okay, let's not talk, or can you talk softly? I would intentionally lower my volume, and then they're going to mirror me. So indirectly, they're complying, but they did not know that they are complying, right? But I'm not going to avoid that talking because it's going to give me a lot of opportunity to get to know who that person is, what makes them tick, and how I can build those bridges and relationships.
Okay. So some of the other distraction techniques could be helping someone else instead of doing their own task so that it looks like a nice thing, but really they're doing it to avoid doing their own work.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an opportunity. I would say, I'm so proud that you would love to color with your friend. And since you're amazing at this type of technique, I'm sure they would love to see how you create your work. I'm just going to leave your stuff here for you so that when they ask for help, maybe you can, if you're up to it, you can show them your skills and walk away. So inadvertently, they are going to mirror the other person, but it's not a direct demand. And you're also allowing them to build those peer relationships once again.
Right. You're always layering things. It's never doing one thing. It's always doing a bunch of things at the same time.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and I know I'm giving a lot of examples because I feel like this is one of those areas where a lot of examples are helpful.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Another thing could be making jokes or being silly, just being completely the clown in the moment.
Those are hard ones for me because I really get caught into it, right? That's my, you know, yeah, I I love kids that are being silly and have got a great sense of humor. That's my weakness over there. But I would use that as an opportunity to say, oh, this type of humor I think pairs really well with red, okay? Because it makes people like really stop and think. Can you give me another joke and maybe we can pair it with another color, right? So I'm inadvertently teaching the colors and coordinations and I would insert like, okay, let's draw this type of shape to match this type of sense of humor in this color. And hey, I'm achieving the task, but I'm also using the humor and making it fun at the same time. And once again, still building those relationships and finding out who they are.
Another one that I came across when people are asking these sorts of questions online was asking irrelevant questions. And before we get into that as a strategy, I think it's really important to note that autistic people are often reprimanded when they ask for clarification on something. So just because something seems irrelevant to you it might not actually be an irrelevant question. So you need to be a little bit careful that you're not just dismissing a question out of hand because you think it's irrelevant. Maybe get to the root of that question first. So an example, I was like thinking about that and I thought, well, if a child, for example, I mean PDAs in adults, you don't outgrow this, but using a kid as an example, I might have had a question like, why are fours sometimes drawn with the top open and sometimes they're drawn with the top closed? Like there's no one way to draw the number 4. So why is that? And that might look like work avoidance. That might look like a distraction or an irrelevant question. But if I don't have the answer on how to correctly draw the number 4, I'm getting nothing done today.
Yeah. One of the strategies used is I can address the issue because listening to the question, it's I'm picking up that you want the correct form in order to continue your work to make sure that it is correctly done. So I would say there are two forms of writing it. This form was used, more inscriptive, and this is more, you know, used in common day. Both are correct. Which number do you prefer to use? This is coming down to a preference. And you're just telling them there's no wrong way of doing it. So they're like, "Oh, okay." And that's okay. So giving them the choice is like inadvertently giving them that belief that they're in control of the situation and they're going to comply with you naturally because now it's their choice and there's no wrong way of doing it.
So the second thing I have to avoid work is to delay or to make excuses. So that's the going to the bathroom example, or something like, I just need 5 more minutes.
Well, those are the ones that are really tricky, right? Because they can sometimes do end up in huge emotional outbursts. They go from, just, you know, we talk about meltdowns and shutdowns, that can escalate very quickly down that avenue. So the 5 more minutes is also setting those explicit boundaries, right? And just say, you chose 5 minutes, you can set the timer and you're in charge of the timer. When the timer goes off, we can do, you can pick which one of these you would like to do. And as soon as you are done that, we can go back to doing what you prefer to do.
So having a tangible timer to say, hey, you're in control, you've got 5 minutes, sure, here's your timer, this is, there's no, and then what if it's I can't do that right now, I'm too tired, or I'll do it later, I'll do it after lunch.
So what I would do is like, okay, that's fine. You can do that later, but I'm going to go and engage, and I would intentionally engage in the activity of their preference. And they're like, oh, but I was like, yeah, of course you can come and do this with me as soon as you're ready to do what needs to be done. So you let me know when you're ready, and I'm looking forward to having you come and join me with this preferred activity. And just leave it at that.
There's also, sometimes these are tricky, so there's also needing to have everything to be perfect before you start a task. And it might be a specific pencil or a full water bottle or whatever it might be. And you really need to know the autistic person to understand when it's avoidance and when that's actually needed for self-regulation.
Yes, and those are the circumstances in which I would prep my student effectively in order to achieve that task to be done. So if I know that they had to have a specific pencil that had to be sharpened and it had to be to the right hand side and the book had to be right in the middle and something else to the left, I would allow them to set their environment up for success. Why wouldn't I allow them that time? Absolutely. It might take a little bit longer to do that, but you need to be flexible and you need to work with that person in order to achieve the outcome.
The last one that I have under this heading is disguising compliance. And I'm not sure that this is actually a problem, but I mean, it's on the list. And that's doing the task, but pretending that it was their idea. Or performing the task in an exaggerated way or a humorous way, like typing on your laptop with your nose, for example.
Well, ultimately, are they accomplishing the task at hand? Yes. Does it matter how they did it? No. But, if I want to start, kind of tailoring that strategy, I would go, I know it's going to take a lot longer for them to type it out with their nose. So I'm going to say, hey, I would use their preferred activity once again. I would use bait and go, as soon as you're done, I'm going to be over here doing this. And I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, they're like, what? What? You're going to be doing that? Yeah. So, hey, I love that you're printing with your nose. I know it's going to take you a while. So, as soon as you're finished, come and join me. They're automatically going to stop typing with their nose and they're going to use a faster avenue in which to complete the task in order to be able to come and join me to do their preferred activity. So I'm always baiting it, and I'm not telling them don't type with your nose. I'm just allowing them to explore the possibility that there's other avenues in which in getting the work done effectively and quickly in order to do a preferred activity.
So then there's the tough stuff, like the really tough stuff, and that's the oppositional or the controlling behaviors. And I think these are often because the person is already starting to feel overwhelmed or trying to reclaim that autonomy. So when you have outright refusal or defiance, I'm not doing that, you're not the boss of me, you can't tell me what to do. How do you handle those?
Those I would just, a lot of times, I would not even acknowledge the question, right? Because I'm just going to reinforce that aspect of it for them. I'm just going to stay the course. I'm going to stay on focus, on point, and I'm just going to continue doing what needs to be done. And I will have the bait right next to me. And I'll just say, okay. And I would continue doing what needs to be done and allow them to slowly calm, to slowly regulate, to come back to a point where I can see their body language giving me the cues to say, now I can step in and maybe make that open invitation, not a request, it's an invitation to possibly think along the lines of completing the task that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Sometimes you have to let them say no without consequence.
Yep. Because we do at times, we forget that we often want to teach them the word no in situations where it's crucial, where self-protection, and keeping themselves safe, we teach them. If somebody approaches you and offers you candy while they're sitting in the car, you say no. So we've got to allow them, we've got to empower that no, but we've also got to allow it to be, you've got to be, with kids like this, you've got to work with just kind of allowing them to say what needs to be said just to get it out of their system, and then work through, let that anxiety come down, let let them be, let them calm, and then you approach it. Body language is going to be key on this one.
What about when they are controlling others, like giving demands instead of following them? Like, you go get my backpack. Or when they try to sort of micromanage their peers or our adults, or taking over group activities. So when it's involving other people and not just them.
I can say that's so nice that you've offered, like you've asked so and so to help you, but they need to do their own jobs. Would you mind if they did their own, if they got their own backpack? Because it's important for them to learn how to do things for themselves. You're such a great, you're such a great leader, and I love that you take those initiatives, but they need to do their own jobs. So thank you. Um, and when you're ready to join us, grab whatever you think you need, and we'll see you outside. They're not going to go home without their backpack because that's going to bother them, like they've left something behind. Oh my, no, no, no. That's not going to happen.
I think explaining the why behind things is generally pretty helpful for autistic people. So understanding why they need to do certain things, do you think like that's also effective?
Depending upon the question and depending on the situation, their cognitive ability, their age, um, when they're 4 and they haven't got those acquired skills yet, sometimes you don't need to go to an in-depth, or you don't have to explain it explicitly. But when I'm dealing with a teenager or an adult, then it's far more important to understand and answer the questions of why.
Well, I'm thinking about Alex, and when Alex was 4 or 5, he was coming in from recess, and he walked into the classroom and he took off his snow gear and he dropped it on the floor right there and he didn't put it away. And he was tired now, so he just sat down. And the teacher said, "Alex, you can't leave that on the floor." I didn't introduce Alex. He's my oldest son, level 1, lower support needs. And she said, "You can't leave that on the floor. People want to walk through." And he was like, "Well, but they can just step over it." So I think sometimes, even though he doesn't have PDA, sometimes just the why can make a difference between understanding and not understanding, and getting compliance and not getting compliance. Like, he didn't know really why that was a problem because he figured, yeah, you can just step over it.
Yeah. And those are the circumstances in which, when they're young, you explain to them, we need to hang it up so our snowsuits can dry off so they're nice and dry when you want to put them on again. And B, if there was an emergency and we all had to run out of the door, we're all going to trip and fall and really hurt ourselves. So let's make sure that everything's hanging up, and then that way we're all staying safe.
Yeah, it's a simple answer to the why question, but I think it makes a difference because generally speaking, autistic people don't want to follow rules if they don't make any sense.
Absolutely. So, I mean, those are circumstances in when you're starting to introduce why certain things are done in a certain way. Um, but if it's a more complicated question, then I would, you don't necessarily have to explain certain situations to a 4-year-old. Sometimes you just need them to go with the flow, for their own safety and for their own well being, versus an adult who needs to know the whys in order to have a better appreciation for the situation.
Okay, the last one I have is probably the one that people are most interested in, and that is aggression. So when you get the screaming, the hitting, throwing things, like aggression can be toward themselves, it could be towards other people. What's the strategy for that one?
The first strategy is to give them the space, right? They are now spiraling out and they are just, okay, I don't understand this. I am in that internal, they're internally in a mess right now. So you just got to give them space. However, when it comes to the safety of themselves or to the safety of others, that's the only time that you really need to intervene, is in to ensure safety. Like, I would not allow a person to run across the road when I know there's cars coming, because they're in just blinded by their emotions right now. So prevention techniques would have to be, initiated in order to keep them safe. Um, but just clearing the space and allowing them to calm, and the least said is the best at that time, because anything that you say can just keep adding fuel to the fire. So the best thing to do is to stay calm and allow them to burn through that. And when they are calm and they're ready to listen, that's when you're going to say, first and foremost, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Then you just be quiet and you wait till they are okay, because you're not going to make any type of headway. You're not going to make that connection until they are in a state of regulation where you can make that impact. So, first strategy is to give them this space. Second is, if they're in immediate danger to themselves or anyone, I would intervene. And lastly, I would just be quiet and just be an observer, because you're going to learn a lot from how quickly that this person is able to go from an intense situation and calm themselves to an emotionally regulated states. And then based on that is when I know what type of techniques and strategies to use and teach them in order to help them calm a lot more effectively and quickly so that they come down to a regulated state.
The last one that I have, that if you go looking for information on this, meltdowns and shutdowns are listed even on reputable websites, reputable sources. They have them down as strategies for demand avoidance. And I think that's incorrect. I don't think meltdowns and shutdowns are ever tactical. It is never with a goal in mind. It is a systemic overload. And it's not a tool for you to get what you want. That is a tantrum. That might superficially look the same, but it is not the same thing. Meltdowns do not have a goal. So it's not going to, the meltdown's not going to end simply because the cause of that meltdown is taken away. That's not how they work. So I think the last thing someone needs when they're having a meltdown is for someone to say, you need to stop.
I agree with you. And it's just going to make things worse, right? Because now they're just spiraling out of control. And then you're telling them that you need to stop. I don't think so. Now that, you know, that avoidance and that oppositional is just going to skyrocket. So this is one of the circumstances in which silence is truly golden and will accomplish, because A, your presence sometimes can be a trigger. So just your presence alone can be. So usually I stand a little bit to the side, A, keeping myself safe, but keeping others safe, and so that I have eyes on the person and just giving them their space, right? Because that could be just my presence could be a trigger, and then you add a verbal request. Oh boy. Oh yeah. It's just like, oh, who do you think you are and why do you think you're doing this, right? So to me, if I could disappear into the wall and just keep eyes on them and keep them safe, that would be my number one goal.
Yeah, I was really surprised and disappointed that some of these go to websites for information had meltdowns and shutdowns as a strategy for PDAers to get what they're looking for. Like that is not okay. It is not okay to be spreading false information, and I really believe that is incorrect.
Yeah, that is a total different category unto itself, right? So it's unfortunate that it's there and it's not being addressed as a separate issue altogether. But with so many overlapping symptoms, you can see how people sometimes can get that confused.
Yeah, I just, you know, appropriate word accuracy. I need words to be accurate to
Well,
describe a situation.
it's the difference between a request and a command, right? So it's the same. You're asking for the same type of action, but how it's presented to you and what it means is two totally different things.
So I think that that wraps up what I have. The last sort of notes that I had were that I think that it's really important that PDAers feel like they're being taken seriously and not being judged. It's not like it's not intentional, and I think that there's probably sort of a gradient, or I hate using the word spectrum because it sounds like there's ends to it, and there isn't. Um, I know that PDA is not a diagnosis necessarily, but I think there must be varying degrees sort of it, because I'm sure that sometimes, and certainly when I was younger, a lot of this really resonates with me. Like if someone, even now, if someone says, "Oh, you look really tired. Why don't you just stop for a while and take a break and go have a cup of tea or something?" my immediate thought is, don't you tell me what to do, even though it's a good idea. I don't actually like being told what to do, but I don't have a lot of these sort of, I don't have it all the time. I think it's mostly when my tolerance level is down that I really connect with some of these things. And yeah, it's not all the time. So I wonder if I probably wouldn't meet like a profile for it necessarily, but I can certainly relate to it.
I think everybody has that in them, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. When you're told to do something that you really don't want to do, people, whether you're like neurotypical people, like you get your back up. Like, who the hell do you think you are telling me what to do?
But it doesn't
So it
necessarily have to
exists
be.
in all of us.
Yeah, but I don't mean it that way. I don't mean it like, oh, someone telling me to do something I don't want to do. They could be telling me to do something I was already planning on doing. And now I don't want to do it because you just told me to do it.
Yes. So that's the difference between neurotypical and neurodivergent, right? That is actually a great example in which that fine line is crossed. So I'm glad that you did provide that as a situation or a circumstance in which you have experienced.
Like, I was going to go sit down and have a cup of tea, but now you told me to, so now that's not happening.
Yeah,
Nope.
because now it was a request, right?
Yeah, and
So
it was gentle. It wasn't like, you need to go do this. It was like, oh, it might be a good idea for you to go. No, it's not a good idea anymore. I don't want it.
yep, yep. So it takes from the person who is going to be the one in a situation with the person displaying this type of um, avoidance. You need the number one strategy you need to do is stay calm. You cannot allow yourself to match the intensity of the other person. You have to do the complete opposite. So when they're heightened and they're in spiraling, you cannot join them. You need to be the one. You need to be the anchor. You need to be the one that's calm. You need to be the one that's quiet. You need to be the one that's still. Because while they're spinning and you become that center of focus, they're able to focus on you and slowly start to mirror what you're doing. If I see a person hyperventilating and they're like, I become very quiet, very calm. And I practice my breathing strategies. I go, and I'm not saying a word. I'm not saying a word. And then all of a sudden, this person starts to slowly mirror what you're doing. So awareness in situations like this is key, and calmness. So those would be my two strategies that I use all the time.
So, what are we talking about next time?
Well, in discussing all of this, when your avoidance personality is, I stop to think and it makes it really difficult to build those relationships. It makes it very difficult for you to have what you perceive to be as somebody loving you and having those relationships. So I'd like to talk about a little bit more onto love and attraction and how this can affect that and how you can build those skills in having more meaningful relationships.
It's not going to be my favorite subject.
But that's okay. It's important because it's there's a lot of neurotypical people that need to understand that and be better equipped and have better knowledge on how they can build those meaningful relationships.
We will do it.
Okay. Well, till the next time, have a great day.
We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.